Okay, so we are going to start with Hunter. If you want to share your screen, Hunter, and get started.
Yeah, great. Let me go ahead and share that. So I'm going to be talking about hand and mechanical thinning projects as well as other mechanical treatments. So I'll start with that. Hand thinning, you may think, like the video shows, it involves using your hands to knock down trees, but that is not the case actually. So it's actually using chainsaws or other manual hand tools like axes or hand saws to cut trees or vegetation. Typically involves cutting smaller diameter trees and brush. And so pros of this approach is it's a low cost of entry. Equipment is relatively cheap. You can operate on really any slopes as long as you're comfortable walking on them, and you can operate in wet conditions. And because of that, there's less environmental impacts associated with compaction and sediment runoff. But some of the cons of that is that it generally has much lower efficiency, particularly with larger material, really dense areas or really dense brush. And oftentimes to get any sort of sizable acreage done, you're going to need a reasonably sized crew, 6 to 8 plus folks, like in the photo down there in the bottom right. So kind of as opposed to the hand thinning operation, there is mechanical thinning. And I know when you hear mechanical thinning, you're probably thinking, we're talking about robots losing their hair. But in fact, it is using heavy equipment to do the cutting, processing, skidding, yarding, loading, and hauling of any of the biomass that's being cut as part of that thinning operation. And so in contrast to the hand thinning, it's generally very highly efficient. You can achieve much greater productivity rates with much fewer people and often greater areas of treatment in the same amount of time. It can handle large trees easily up to a point, which is why there's that asterisk. And then generally, or often case with mechanical thinning, because you're able to harvest large areas more efficiently and you're harvesting larger trees, you may be able to offset some of the costs of the treatment with the revenue from those harvested trees, assuming you have the infrastructure in the mills nearby. Just really quickly, just kind of highlight how efficient it is. Here's just a quick video that shows a feller buncher, which is a common tool used in mechanical thinning, that it can cut trees in literally seconds, and then can also orient them properly for moving either skidding or yarding. So it's a much quicker and more efficient method of thinning. Really high productivity. Now, of course, there's obviously a much higher upfront cost, particularly if you're purchasing equipment for this. So that can be a barrier to entry. And then there's also more specialized experience required, both in operating and the maintaining and servicing the equipment that is being used. Heavy equipment is often limited by slopes and by wet conditions. And so you may not be able to operate in all areas or year round, depending on your local site conditions. And then there are also site access limitations, just whether or not you can actually get the equipment into the site that you're going to operate on. It's obviously much easier to get a pickup with a few folks and chainsaws in than trying to get a low boy and a large piece of equipment into some of the more remote access areas. And just to give you an idea of upfront costs, I just pulled this today from a used equipment site. So here's some of the newer fellow bunches that are for sale, going upwards of $500,000 for just that one piece of equipment. So some of the other treatments that we can do are pruning, which is removing the lower branches to increase the height to crown base, or we're reducing the amount of ladder fuels and that continuity into the crowns of the trees. We generally try to target at least 8 feet above the ground, but we want to make sure we're not cutting more than 50% of the total crown. So if you had a 12-foot tree, you would only cut up to 6 feet max, because we want to leave at least 50%. It's generally more effective when combined with other treatments like either hand or mechanical thinning, because it can be really time and labor intensive. So it's a great option for around buildings, around homes as part of defensible space, or alongside roads as part of a shaded fuel break. Now, when we are doing thinning and pruning, there's the leftover slash of the material that's cut that we're not using. So we need to dispose of that somehow. And Anna's going to talk more about this, but we can pile it to be burned either in hand piles or in machine piles. We can chip with a hand chipper, or we can use for larger operations, often mechanical. We can use horizontal grinders or tub grinders. And then there's also the lop and scatter option, where you cut the slash into smaller pieces and disperse that into the operations area. Another option for mechanical fuels reduction is mastication, which is the chipping, grinding, or shredding of fuels in place or in the ecosystem. Now, it's important to note that this does not actually reduce the overall fuel load. It's just changing the fuel profiles and the continuity. But the mastication can be highly productive or efficient depending on your fuels and topography and local conditions. It also can be really expensive if those conditions are difficult. So I've seen mastication on a per acre basis range from anywhere from $500 an acre up to $5,000 an acre, depending on local site conditions. And so to give an idea of what mastication looks like, this is a vertical grinder right here. See if the video will play. So it's shredding and dispersing that material in the area. It's not removed off-site. And so when we're doing these hand and mechanical treatments, ultimately, the goal is to reduce fuel and vegetative continuity, either both vertically and horizontally across the landscape. So reducing those ladder fuels, we're increasing space between residual trees and vegetation, or spacing between structures and vegetation, decreasing those crown densities. And then when we're doing those operations, we can generally try to select or retain fire-resistant species of vegetation. And it's not without its limitations. Its mechanical and hand treatments are not a complete surrogate for some of the important ecosystem effects of fire. And generally speaking, they're not reducing. And in some cases like mastication, they may actually be increasing surface fuels. So there's things to take into account when you're doing those, when you're choosing to use mechanical or hand treatments.
Okay, thanks, Hunter. That was awesome. All right, Jen, you're up next.
Hey, yeah, I'm having trouble sharing my screen here, so.
We can see it pretty good.
Or I just shared it, Jen.
Oh,
if you want.
okay.
Yeah.
All right, that's perfect. And I'm not sure if my camera's on, but okay. Let's see here. Yeah, so we're talking about, let's start on slide 1. There we go. There we go. Yeah, so we're going to be talking about biological and chemical treatments. So first, let me start off by saying that fuel treatments are most effective when there's multiple strategies that are combined, especially these. And so following up with seeding or before our chemical treatments. So just understanding that it is more effective when there's multiple strategies that are combined to ultimately reduce the potential for wildfire to spread and intensify. Fuel treatments can reduce the negative outcomes of wildfire, and in some cases promote even beneficial wildfire outcomes for invasive species. And then also for reseeding for native perennials, which is part of how these treatments go together hand in hand. And then our fuels treatments also, they can contribute to certain fire operations, so allowing firefighters to engage safely when doing firefighting operations, and then ultimately reducing suppression and repair costs. So that is some reasons why we do them. And also, they work hand in hand with when I talk about using multiple strategies, we're also talking about different mitigation strategies, such as vegetation around homes to reduce risks to people's homes. So that's kind of why we do them. Megan, if you want to go into slide 2. Okay, so targeted grazing. It's the application of using different kinds of livestock at a certain time of year. And that is, to be honest, we don't do them a whole lot with the BLM. It takes a whole lot of time and planning, and the duration and intensity. We have to kind of know how long and how intense to go. There's a whole lot of planning that goes into that. For example, if we're grazing for yellow star thistle with sheep or goats, during the bolt stage when the vegetation is bolting, usually April to June, it can dramatically reduce seed production. So you kind of have to know all of those ins and outs and and why you would use target grazing over something else. So, a good plan of grazing would aim to mitigate impacts of both plant life and wildlife and fuels reduction. So again, there's an extensive amount of planning that goes in with targeted grazing. And, you ultimately want to reduce the invasive species encroachment and enhance native vegetation. So we're talking about those perennials and like bunch grasses out there, while trying to also reduce that fuel loading. So, Megan, you can go ahead and go to next slide, please. So there's a lot of variables that go in with targeted grazing. So it can favor, different types of animals and different grazing management practices, which I'll talk to a little bit here at the end, and influence productivity and ecological integrity of the land. So I kind of mentioned that already, but, by adjusting that intensity and frequency and timing and duration of grazing or browsing, you can favor different plant species through the process and productive and ecological integrity of the land. So, how often, what time of year, what is currently growing out there for forage for the animals, and when you might even damage the vegetation. So again, a lot of planning goes into targeted grazing. Next slide, Megan. Thank you. And so I'll just touch on this really quick. There's 4 main principles to follow when planning for a grazing management plan. And out of the 4, the proper stocking rate is the most important. And the proper stocking rate means basically the number of animals that are on per acre for a specific amount of time. So you're really trying to protect that soil out there when doing this, because that's basically the heart of everything is in the soil. So being careful with that, with how many animals you put on the landscape. And next slide, please. And again, I'll just breeze through this really quickly. We're talking about those 4 different principles, and this is another one of them. They need water. And so often, water resources, the vegetation around the water resources can get trampled and soil can get compacted, which can cause damage to the area. So again, this is just part of that planning and considerations to take when choosing a management plan. Is there water already out there? Is there fencing that needs to be built? Is there shade? Is there just the right landscape out there for choosing this management practice? Go ahead, Megan. Thank you. And then different kinds. This is different management plans. So there's a deferred rotation, there's a rest rotation, basically meaning like a rest rotation would be a rest period for 1 year or more on the landscapes. Something that you're not going to want to graze every single year. So that might not be the right practice for that particular area. A deferred rotation would be generally changes through like the succeeding years, and would be less than 1 year. So this is just all the factors that take place when choosing a grazing plan and a management plan for that. So again, a lot goes into it. And ultimately there's a risk of rangeland, can be degrading upon the landscape if it's done inappropriately. So all of these things do need to be considered. Next slide, please. So this is my last slide on grazing, and so just choosing the right kind of animal to graze that area. So using the right tool for the right job, just like we're talking about all these other management practices. Is it going to be better to do a hand thinning, to do grazing, to use herbicide, and some of those, by picking the proper animal is going to help with that. Like some animals, like there's certain breeds of cows that don't do well in the desert, that don't do well on steep slopes. You might want to choose, goats do better on steep steep slopes. And they prefer browsing, so reaching for leaves and shrubs. So it depends again what you're managing for, what kind of vegetation. You know, and this is just a fun fact for me that I like to mention. Like, did you know that cows and goats don't have teeth on the very top of their mouth? They have a dental pad, and so that's you know, they masticate with the molars in the backs of their mouth, and the cows, they use their tongue for grabbing and ripping forage. So again, like using the right tool for the right job. Do you want to use that tongue and rip the forage out? Do you have to, you know, do you want to use a goat because you're targeting more of the shrubs? So again, using the proper kind of animal. Is there water out there? What kind of climate is there? Topography. And then again, you have to worry about predators out there as well for them, and parasites, disease risk. Yeah, so using the right kind of breed, the right kind of species for the area, and just the right tool. And then the second part of this is just to touch on the different types of herbicides treatments, or why we do them. So herbicide treatments are a valuable tool for, again, controlling those unwanted plants on rangelands, such as that dreadful cheatgrass that's pictured there. Herbicides can be applied before the weed grows. It might be easier on the landscape than some other management treatments. For instance, I mentioned that trampling, you know, can cause that erosion and that soil compaction. So herbicide would be maybe an easier tool on the landscape, and it works quickly. And in some cases might work longer than a grazing management plan, because the vegetation will grow back a little quicker with grazing. So that's one of the reasons why land managers might choose herbicides over grazing in some areas. Next slide, please. Okay, so herbicides can be a cost-effective alternative to prescribed burden. There's a lot that goes into it. You know, Hunter mentioned how expensive those some of that equipment is, and then personnel. So sometimes it can be not all the time, but a cost-effective alternative to prescribed burning, and, you know, manipulating those plant communities and wildlife habitat. It just, again, might be a little bit easier on the landscape. Slide. So we're talking here about kind of different methods of application. They can be applied by the air or by the ground. There's a variety of different kinds out there, but knowing the timing for the species is important. For instance, and I always say this word wrong, so go ahead and correct me, whoever wants to, but imazometh, it's the chemical that we generally use on cheatgrass, and is available to us as the VLM to treat cheatgrass in the fall or the early spring. And there's other kinds of herbicides out there that are more known to homeowners, such as like Roundup. That's most widely used as an herbicide across the country. And if it's a non-selective broad spectrum post-emergent herbicide, it can control like a wide range of different species, and should be used before seed formation. So again, it's all about timing. Megan, are they not seeing our slides?
Yeah, I just reshared. I just want to confirm, can folks see now?
I've been able to see, it just says herbicide, broad spectrum, pre-emergent. No, is that wrong? Other
Yeah,
people can't.
I'm wondering, hey, for the folks, they might need to adjust their view. Sometimes it'll just show the speaker and not the slide. But uh-oh, I might be having some technical difficulties too. Sorry, Jen, your presentation.
That's okay. I think I just had one more slide to get through.
Let me see if I can try. Yeah, I'm having some difficulties sharing right now for some reason.
And
I'm
I
sorry.
have two. So that's okay. I will just finish my last slide, which is it's basically just a picture of wildfire in the background, and I'm just kind of going to talk about why we use it. And I've already kind of mentioned that. So it basically it works quickly. It offers a cost-effective alternative to some other treatments. Selective herbicides can target specific weeds, so they're safe to use in areas with other plants and other grasses. Let's see, like for instance, if only one type of weed grows in your yard, or we're just trying to target cheatgrass or a few types, you can look for a pre-emergent herbicide that can block just that weed from growing, while protecting perennial grasses, which are those bunch grasses that I think I mentioned already. So yeah, many weed species dry out quickly during drought and fire season, which are those 1 hour fuels that we call them. So if it rains and they're completely saturated, they can dry out in 1 hour. Those are those weeds that we're trying to get rid of, because they ultimately create a flashy fuel for us in wildfire situations. So that is why we try to get rid of them.
Cool. I apologize for not being able to show you the slides, y'all.
Yeah, I wonder what happened there.
Oh.
All right, so Dennie and Shari, wondering if you have anything to add about grazing that you wanted to add in there, or we could save you guys for the discussion panel. It's up to you.
Well, a lot of the things I think Jen was mentioning with grazing is on open range land, and what we do is more specific kind of urban interface, and we bring our own water, fencing, predator control. We're with the animals 24/7. We work under a lot of power lines, reduce the fuel risks there, and a lot of it is steep canyons with HOAs on both sides. So it's kind of very specific in reducing fuel loads. We work with Reno Fire Department. We've worked with Anna on several projects. We just finished a project for BLM in the Wandering Skipper critical habitat area, where there was a lot of thatch and noxious weeds that they were working on. So just, they're not a perfect tool, but they're very appropriate in a lot of areas. Just a couple things, goats do recycle in place, so there is zero material to be hauled out. They can eliminate ladder fuels up to 6 feet. That's just the nature of a goat. They can be used also on sensitive wildlife areas. They do not like to go into standing water, so they don't pollute waterways. They don't step on nesting birds. They're very careful where they put their feet, unlike a heavier animal, such as cattle. They're very light on the land, so they can be used in areas like that very specifically. We also did a project last winter for Rosewood Nature Study Area. And if anybody's seen that, it's just massively invaded with white top. And, it's a wetland and it's sensitive. So, but that property has taken years and years and years to get in that condition. So, it's going to take multiple treatments. And that is one thing in using targeted grazing. You have to be patient. it's definitely a slower process. You know, and you're going to need to do it each year in certain areas, or if you're trying to eliminate some noxious weeds, you might have to have a plan. You know, we're going to do this 3 years, we're going to hit it at this growth stage. And, you know, the main thing is getting with the land managers so that they understand what the goals are, that what's expected, and that everybody's on the same page for a good outcome.
And the goats are the only stock that'll eat cheatgrass at any stage, so there's a big need for that. Wherever there's, no matter what stage it's in, there the goats love it. And with white pine and star thistle, all the thistles.
All right, is there anything else that you guys want to add? And we'll have more opportunity to chat in a bit. Let's get Anna on here for the last quick presentation about prescribed fire. And then we could just have more of a discussion.
Sorry, just working on loading it. Can you see it?
Okay. Yep.
All right. So yes, I'm talking about prescribed fire today. So prescribed fire is the planned application of low to moderate intensity fire to the landscape by fire and fuel specialists to manage land management objectives. And why do we use prescribed fire? So excuse me here, I get a little sciencey here. On the left, we have some satellite imagery of the state of Nevada. And on the right, we have a map of the different fire regimes found throughout the state of Nevada. And I'm sure a lot of you haven't heard about fire regimes, but a fire regime basically refers to what type of fire a vegetation community used to experience before we started suppressing fire all the time. And so how frequently the fires used to burn, and then also what was the severity of the fire? Was it low severity, not killing off a lot of trees, or was it replacement severity, means stand replacing fire? And so fire regime groups 1 and 2, the yellow and the greens, the light green and the dark green, those areas used to burn historically less than every 35 years. And then when you get out into the yellows and the purples, those areas used to burn every 35 to 200 years, either in a low severity or a mixed severity or a stand replacing. So I just wanted to let everyone see that how diverse the state is with all different vegetation communities, and that these vegetation types evolved with fire, and by us keeping fire out of them for so long has really thrown a lot of systems out of sync. And so I just want to talk about prescribed fire. When we're talking about prescribed fire, we're really talking about the agency-led prescribed fires. So the different agencies are responsible for it, and that is authorized through the state of Nevada. And then to pull off a prescribed burn, you have to have a smoke permit, you have to have a burn plan, and you have to have qualified personnel. And this makes it all seem very easy, but before you can ever put fire in the ground, there's a tremendous amount of preparation and planning that needs to go on. And then with the burn plan, there's very specific guidelines and environmental parameters that dictate when you can actually ignite your prescribed fire. And this is in contrast to open burning, which is really what landowners will burn piles on their own property. And those burn permits are issued through the local fire protection districts, and each local fire protection district has their different requirements, whether what time of season they'll allow their citizens to burn, how long you can have your piles of burning for, and all that. So it's really a local level and just on individual property owners. And so the big land management agencies that are really using prescribed fire in Nevada, that's the U.S. Forest Service, Bureau of Land Management, Nevada Division of Forestry, and the local fire protection districts. I'm not going to be going over cultural burning. That's fire that's led by the tribes. And I'm not really talking about the open burning by the landowners using the open burn permits. And so this picture here, I just want to let you know this was a pile burning that we did. That's the Sweetwater Mountain Range in the background. And this was initially a lop and scatter treatment that was done to remove the encroaching pinyon in sage-grouse habitat. And then I came in and saw that the lop and scatter had created this tremendous fuel bed that was then threatening the sagebrush community that we wanted to protect. And so we went in and piled and burned after lop and scatter had been done. And so just the different types of prescribed fire, pile burning is the most common, where you either hand create the piles by hand or by equipment. And that way you're just burning the material that's put in the pile. And it's not spreading throughout the forest. Broadcast burning is burning off the entire vegetation, and that's non-forest types. This is Mason Valley Wildlife Refuge out here, burning off the tule to open up some duck habitat. And then understory burning is when you have an overstory of trees that you're burning underneath. And this is the most beneficial type of fire because it's mimicking the natural fire that used to burn through these forests. And so we really like to use this the most, but it is the most difficult to use because of all the restrictions and the prescription parameters you have to meet before you can actually ignite these forests. And I just want to talk about a low intensity fire that is typical with prescribed fire. And just to go through this little infographic quickly, number one, with the low intensity fire, you're not burning off the mineral soil. So you're keeping that intact, not creating hydrophobic soils that we see after really high intensity stand replacing fire. Number two, you are burning off the ladder fuels. That is what carries the fire from the surface up into the canopy and kills trees. And so that is beneficial to remove those ladder fuels. Number three, you are keeping that duff layer intact, so that helps with reducing erosion after you're burning. Number four, there is carbon dioxide that is released from these burns, so that is a negative. And then number five, you are burning off the fine fuels, and the fine fuels is what carries the fire in wildfires. So we see that when wildfires move through an area, typically when they get to an area that has been burned within a couple of years with a prescribed fire, the wildfire will either go out in that area or it will have drastically different results compared to an area that hasn't had prescribed fire in it. And then post-fire, number six, the trees do store a lot of carbon, so that's a positive. Certain tree species will develop thicker bark after prescribed fire, low intensity fire, so that helps them in future wildfires survive higher intensity fire. And then the nutrients are recycled back into the soil from the burned vegetation, so that improves plant growth. And you've now created a fire break in between your fuel, in between your trees, so that if a wildfire were to move through there, hopefully it will stay on the ground and not jump from tree to tree. And then number 10, you do have new plant growth, which is really beneficial. And so some of the pros and cons of prescribed fires. The pros: lower the risk of more dangerous fires. Like I said, if we can reintroduce low intensity wildfire into a lot of our areas that used to experience low intensity wildfire, hopefully we're not going to have a high intensity wildfire in the future, and protect our trees and not lose them all to stand replacing fire. You do increase the water availability for the remaining plants. You reduce tree competition, which helps in times of drought and improves their ability to resist insects and diseases. You increase plant diversity. Some species of plants need fire to regenerate. It improves wildlife habitat. It creates new forage for the wildlife. And then it can help control invasive species. Like we had mentioned, the star thistle and other species that you can burn off, depending on the timing of year that you're using. Some of the cons: it does reduce air quality. Prescribed fire smoke is of shorter duration and less intensity than wildfire smoke, but it does impact people, especially people that have health, sorry, having a hard time talking about people that might have breathing problems that will be impacted by smoke. It does release the carbon dioxide. It does pose risks to people, property, and animals. Nationwide, less than 1% of prescribed fires escape, but they can escape. And then we know Nevada has cheatgrass. Cheatgrass likes to come in areas that have recently burned, so it can increase invasive species. And then there can be a potential increased cost if there is an escape. But also one of the pros is it is more cost effective than hand treatments or mechanical treatments. You can, the cost per acre is way lower than hand or mechanical treatments. And like I said, it's can be really ecologically beneficial as well. And if people are looking for more information about prescribed fires that are happening around them, the Nevada Department of Environmental Protection, the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection has this prescribed fire interactive map that you can get on and see all the different smoke permits. All these little flames are different smoke permits that are active right now. And then when they turn red, that means there's actual burning. So Tahoe Douglas Fire Protection District is burning in the Tahoe Basin this week. NDEP does not regulate smoke permits in Washoe County or Clark County. And so those counties are regulated by the local counties, those smoke permits. And then in Tahoe, if you go to TahoeLivingWithFire.com, they do have this interactive map that shows all the current prescribed fire operations that are happening this week, and then also all of our current forest fuels. And you can click on those icons to get more information from those. And then I do want to just leave with just one thought that land managers, we talk a lot about fuels reduction. That's what we're able to manage to reduce wildfire threat to communities and to our forests and rangelands. But it really, the homeowner really has to ensure that their home is hardened. And so while we can manage the vegetation and reduce the fuel loading, we're not going to stop the wildfire from coming through there. And so what we're hoping to do is reduce the intensity of the wildfire, try to keep the frame lengths below 4 feet so we can get firefighters in there safely with hand tools or engines to fight the fire. But if you haven't done home hardening, defensive space, no matter how much fuels treatment we do around homes, your home can still ignite if there's receptive fuel beds around your home. So that's, and I will stop sharing.
All right, Anna, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So to really kind of think about these concepts and think about these different tools in the toolbox, Megan is going to share a couple of images, and then we want you guys in the audience to think about what fuels management tool you would use. So hopefully Megan's screen sharing is working a little bit better. So let's go to the first picture here. So here is an example of, obviously it's a forest with trees that have died. And so you'll see a pole that just came up, and we want you to think about what tools you would likely use in here. So we've got hand thinning, mechanical thinning, herbicide, targeted grazing, prescribed fire, pile burning, and mowing. So what do we think we would use in this case to reduce the wildfire risk? We'll give people a few minutes to think about that.
And then I can't see the responses, Christina, just FYI. So you're gonna have to.
I can't either, so I don't know what that's all about. Heard some Zoom difficulties today.
Yeah, I can see them. We have 6 out of 15 who have participated so far.
Yeah, it's weird since
I can
the host can't see him and I can't see him either.
So funny.
Yeah, it's just the way it goes. All right, we'll give people another minute or two on this one, thinking about the different tools and how likely it would be. I know it takes some time to complete, so we won't rush you through it too much. I put a lot of different options on here.
Yeah. And then I'd like to, it'd be interesting to hear what the folks, our experts would, how they would do it too.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll have time, but I did have some pictures of some treatments in this type of bark beetle activity.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna go to the next picture, Megan. Let's go ahead and close that one off. And here's an example of just a different ecosystem type, which would be more in the sagebrush and in the pinyon and juniper. So thinking about what different tools in the toolkit could be here. And it's not a test if you don't have time to complete them all. It's more just kind of trying to get people to think about all of the different tools that we have in the toolbox. Yeah, but unfortunately, so you can't see the results, Megan.
No,
You're
I
having
can't see
some problems
I can't see
today.
the results, but I can, if you want, we can move on to the next one, or
I think we should just stop with this one, Megan.
okay, sounds good.
Yeah, 6 folks have participated in this one, 7 now.
It's funny that we can't see it.
Okay, I'll just leave it open, but let you keep going into the discussion and just
Okay.
tell me when, and I'll just give it about another minute and then I'll end it.
Okay, sounds good. So just thinking about some questions that I have, I wanted to ask Dennie and Shari if you guys have an example that you would be willing to share of kind of how, when you were asked to come in and do grazing work, had other work been done in that area beforehand? Did anyone come in after and do other work, or was the grazing the primary tool that was used in the areas that you guys work?
Well, generally it is just the targeted grazing, but in that example you're mentioning, following the Collin Ranch fire, we were contracted by NDF and MB Energy to reduce fuels by 85% in the Rosewood Canyon and the Horseman's Canyon. And we've treated those properties for 3 consecutive years now. And the first year, I know Anna was with NDF then, and they came in, they followed the goats, and they did come in and do some masticating on like large sagebrush to make more of a break between bushes and the trees. So I know they did come in and also on the, after the goats grazed, they followed up with quite a bit of masticating and sitting there.
Does anybody else have just examples of projects where a lot of different tools were used in one spot? And I know that Anna will have a ton, I'm sure, but just like an example of, okay, here's one project area and we use the following tools.
Yeah, if I could share a screen, I got a few pictures here. Where is it? Now it's showing the wrong one. There we go. Can you see it?
Not quite yet, but I bet it'll load up in a sec.
Oh,
Zoom
it
is
says
killing
screen
me
sharing
today.
has stopped.
Yeah, so you just have to restart. Screen sharing can be such a pain.
Okay, can you see it now?
Yeah.
All right, so Spooner Lake up in Lake Tahoe, we had a pretty big bark beetle outbreak in the 90s.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't want to move forward for me, of course.
I don't know what's going on with Zoom today.
There
I'm
we go.
sorry to
Okay, so this is what happens, the fuels after you have a bark beetle outbreak. Tremendous fuel loading.
Wow.
You can see some new trees popping up in here. And so where we were able to get equipment in, where there's roads, flatter terrain, we were able to remove these logs. Steeper areas where we can't get equipment in, this was then hand piled and burned. Fast forward a couple decades, that same area was the Spooner Landscape Resilience Project. It was 300 acres. It was helicopter logged back in 2018. More pile building was done after that and before it. We're still burning the piles in there. I'm hoping to finish them all this winter, and my goal is to reintroduce understory fire into there. And so just a few more photos. The helicopter was whole tree log or whole tree removal to a log landing. This picture shows the trees on the ground that were cut for the helicopter logging, and then the piles in the foreground, that's from the 90s bark beetle outbreak. So we have tremendous fuel loading out there from an old bark beetle outbreak, and then we had a new bark beetle outbreak over the last couple of years. So areas that aren't seeing treatments, the fuel loading's becoming kind of off the charts in some areas. A tremendous amount of wood was taken out. The logs were taken to a mill, and the limbs and tops was chipped and brought to a biomass plant. So it was a really great project to really utilize all the material that was being hauled out. Most expensive project to date that we've done in the park. And just to show you what the trees, while we were removing a lot of big trees, the research is showing we have 4 to 7 times more trees than we should. We are in dry mix conifer forests that don't support so many trees. And you can look at the tree ring growth from the center of the tree going out and about.
Oh, Anna's gone. Well, the point that she wanted to make there was that as you go out from the center, it's just the rings get smaller and smaller and smaller just because the trees are being restricted with growth because there's just too many straws in the cup in these forests that are so dense. Hunter, do you want to add anything about?
Yeah, I've got one pick kind of a before and after here that I can show. I'll share my screen, and this is kind of more tailored to the landowner side because this was done. So let's see. So this is a before and after. This is on down in Washoe Valley, and this work was actually done by students who did an internship for me, but it was a hand thinning and chipping and pruning. So we went in, this was after the Little Valley fire, there was a lot of ingrowth of Scotch broom. So you can see tremendous amount of ladder fuel up into the crown of the younger Jeffrey pine in there. So they went in, they cut out a lot of the Scotch broom, they cut out quite a bit of the they reduced the density of the cottonwood as well, because they're stump sprouters, so there's a lot of stems coming out. So they went in those big clumps, they found the biggest and healthiest stem and then cut all the rest out, and that's what you can kind of see in the photo there on the right. And then they pruned up to about 10 feet, which is what they could reach with their saw, and then they chipped everything. So this is a kind of a good example of like what a small to moderate sized landowner could do either themselves over time or with a small crew. This was about 3 to 4 students working over probably in total about 7 to 8 days, and it was about 4 acres that they did. So they're probably moving about about a half an acre a day. And this was all, these aren't professional contracting crews. They're not necessarily the most efficient, but it's students who are learning and getting that experience. And a good example of what dispensable space can look like around a home, with clearing out a lot of those ladder fuels, both from the understory as well as raising the crown bases on the residual trees, and then spacing out those trees so that they're not interlocking or have overlapping crowns.
Awesome. Thank you. Jen, do you want to add anything else before we move to wrapping this up? Or does anybody in the audience have any questions?
I don't have any photos, but we have done several projects with herbicide and have multiple different strategies involved in there. So we have one up on the dog skins, and that was started in 2017. And we have like 7 different monitoring areas. So after we do a treatment, we go out and take pictures and do intersects and monitor. So we do have, there's probably photos out there somewhere that I just didn't have time to get. But that specific project was a lop and scatter and then mastication. And then in fall, we herbicided in 2021 with herbicide application treatments. And we're still seeing the effectiveness of the herbicide today. So almost 2 years later. So I wish I had pictures to show of that, but I don't. But that is a good example of it's just a little over 1,700 acres of treatment out there, and was very successful with multiple strategies being used.
Awesome. Well, if nobody has any questions, I think we'll start to wrap up because we are slated to end here at 1 o'clock. So here is a poll that we would like everybody to answer just after, taking this today. What things did you learn? taking the time to participate in that poll would be super helpful. And if anybody has any questions or wants to reach out directly to any of the experts that we had on today, just email lwf@unr.edu and I'll put that in the chat. But does anybody have any kind of last comments? Anna, thanks for joining us again. It seemed like your computer restarted or something,
Yeah.
but I was able to
Yeah.
explain the tree rings and what we were seeing there. But yeah, does anyone have anything else to add? Anyone in the audience have any questions?
I did have, if I could just share, unless there is an audience member that has a question. Just wanted to.
I was about to say also with the audience, this is a small group, so feel free to just unmute and ask your question too if you want.
Yeah, I just wanted to share another photo. On the left is a before photo of some hand thinning and chipping, and on the right is afterwards. This was 2000, 2001. This is North Canyon Road. This is now the fourth entry that I've gone in there. So that was the first entry, or sorry, this is the third entry. And you can see the difference. What we're really trying to do is promote aspen regeneration, and aspen is kind of considered a natural fuel break when it's really green and healthy. And you can see how much aspen's come in since the initial cutting over 20 years ago. And then these are some of the piles, and you can still see there's still a tremendous amount of conifers in there. So I'm actually going to go in for a fourth entry after we burn these piles and take out a lot of these bigger firs and send them down to the mill. So multiple hand thinning followed by mechanical. It's just a lot to try to get some of these ecosystems back to healthy and resilient and reduce the fuel loading. That's all I have.
Awesome. These are great examples. Well, all right, everybody. Thanks for the speakers for coming. I hope folks learned some stuff, and yeah, these are the tools in the toolbox that we use. So there's opportunities to use these tools around your home, around and in your general community as well, and in the lands that border your communities as well. So yeah, if there's nothing else, then we'll go ahead and let everyone go.